Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the New Jersey Globe debate between the candidates for Congress in New Jersey's 11th District, the Democratic incumbent, Mikie Sherrill, and the Republican challenger, Paul DeGroot. I'm David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe. I want to thank you both for participating in this vital discussion of ideas that will enable voters to compare your views and decide who might represent them best in Congress. I've reviewed the rules of this debate with both candidates in advance. Each will have equal time to present opening statements, respond to others' positions, ask a question of their opponent, and make closing statements. Each question in this debate has been prepared by me and has not been shared with anyone in advance. I'll respectfully ask that both candidates stick to their allotted time. I'll raise my hand with about 15 seconds remaining. That'll be a signal to wrap up your answer. If you go too long, I'll just hold my hand up, and if that doesn't work, then I'll interrupt. As I say in every one of these debates, my job is to be the moderator and the moderator only. I'm not here to take sides. My opinion does not matter at all. So I'll do exactly that. I will moderate it, and I'll look to each of you to make sure that what your opponent says is based on fact. If a candidate is directly attacked during a response, at my discretion, I'll give an extra 30 seconds for a response. We conducted a coin toss before the start of the debate. Congresswoman Sherrill won the coin toss. She has opted to give the second opening statement and the second closing statement. So we'll begin tonight's debate with Paul DeGroot.
Well, thank you, David. And tonight, I'm here to offer a new direction for this district. I'm Paul DeGroot. I am a pragmatic conservative. Most importantly, though, I'm an independent thinker, and I'm going to offer a new direction about where this country, where this district, and where the New Jersey should be going. You know, I'm not the scary, in this time, Halloween time, the scary boogeyman that my opponent makes me out to be. I'm a retired 25-year career prosecutor who grew up right here in New Jersey. I attended public schools. I was raised in a blue-collar union household with my father, who was a firefighter. And I'm raising my family in CD11. And I'm also working hard to raise the children, Alexander, 4.5, and my daughter, Jordan, 2, in this district. I spent more than 2 decades fighting crime and taking on criminals and taking them off the street. I was in the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office. I prosecuted drug dealers, gangs, murderers, and corrupt government officials, and I did my job well. I put a lot of bad people away. And I took the worst of the worst off the streets of Paterson, one of the top 100 most dangerous cities. I did the work, and I led from the front lines. I protected women from domestic violence. I protected children from sexual abuse. And I did what it takes to make us safe. And now more than ever, we need someone like me in Congress to get things done. As I said, I'm the father of 2 beautiful children, a daughter and a son. And the way that things have changed in the past 2 years, it scares me. We have violence on our streets. The economy is in an absolute free fall. Right now, there are policies that are being promoted and endorsed by my opponent and the Biden administration are the worst, and we are headed for a disaster of a recession unless we change course.
Thank you.
We have record high inflation, gas prices, and we need to change. And I'm an outsider and a pro-choice defender of a women's right to choose to get this country back on track.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman?
Well, thank you so much, David. And thanks for holding this debate, a key part of our democracy. It's really an honor to be here tonight. You know, I've served this country from the time I was 18 years old. 1990, I left home, went to the Naval Academy, and took my first oath to the Constitution of the United States. I then went on to serve almost 10 years in the United States Navy, first as a helicopter pilot and then as a Russian policy officer. I went on to serve again at the U.S. Attorney's Office, starting working with police to help create relationships with the communities they served. I helped people coming out of federal prison to safely reenter our communities, and then went on as a federal prosecutor to take illegal guns off the street, help elderly people avoid Ponzi schemes, and making sure that I was always working with law enforcement to keep our communities safe. I'm now raising my 4 kids here in the district and really working hard to imbue in them the same love of this country and the same values that I have. I want to make sure I'm always working to make this district better and safer and more affordable, driving down costs and investing in our future. And that's what I hope to continue to do.
Okay, thank you. Congressman, I'll ask you the first question. Your first choice for the presidency 2 years ago was Cory Booker. Your second choice was Michael Bloomberg. Joe Biden was your third choice. Are you happy with Joe Biden's performance? Should there have been somebody else that might have been the third choice? And also, is he your first choice for 2024?
Well, I've worked incredibly hard to make sure that the legislation under the Biden administration served this district. As I said, I want to constantly be working to make our district better and safer and more affordable. And through the legislation we've passed, we certainly have driven down cost in this district. In fact, something that often frustrates me, and I know people in the district, is the amount of money that we get back for the taxes paid. Well, under this administration, under the last several years in Congress, we have gone from being 48th in the nation with respect to taxes paid versus money coming back into our district to 22nd. That's because we funded things like the Gateway Tunnel Project, made sure that we're investing in research and development to help build the best workforce in the nation that we have here, bringing back money to Picatinny Arsenal. I brought back hundreds of millions of dollars, almost $1 billion, to make sure that Picatinny Arsenal is strong, and we're investing in that defense manufacturing base. So this is what I'll continue to do. Joe Biden has put forth legislation that would do just that. If he is the Democrat running for Congress, I will be supporting him. I'm sorry, for the presidency.
Mr. DeGroot, I'll give you a response to that.
None of those plans have worked. Right now, I don't know. This district is facing high inflation. We are facing high mortgage prices, high rent prices, high gas prices. I do the shopping in my household, and as of today, bacon, milk, eggs, they're through the roof. My shopping cart is only 2/3 filled when it should be 100% filled or overflowing, and the prices are insane. I don't know what the Biden administration is doing, but it's not doing anything well. All these policies are leading to a definite, tremendous recession coming in the next year if we don't do something different. So this is not all smiles here in CD11. This is a lot of painful experience on prices.
And Mr. DeGroot, I have a follow-up for you. It's the other side of the aisle on a presidential race. Polls show that Donald Trump remains the favorite to become the Republican nominee in the next election if he wants to. At this time, is Donald Trump your first choice to be the nominee in 2024?
Well, David, I'd like to note that in my campaign, no matter how hard other people try, I have not sought Donald Trump's endorsement, nor has he offered his endorsement, nor have I campaigned on his endorsement. My policies and my agenda is what's right for CD11. I am looking to whatever it takes to help out this district. I'll work across the aisle with the Democratic Party, and I'll work across the aisle with Governor Murphy and to get things done. I'm not going to bend. I'm not going to fold, but I am my own man. I'm my own person, and I'm going to do what's right for CD11. I want to be the best congressman for this district. That's it. I don't want to go for higher office. No governorship, no senator, no president for me.
Congresswoman?
Well, I just would point out that because of a lot of the policies that we put in place, in fact, specifically a policy that I suggested the White House using the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to really help drive down those gas costs at the pump, because we've seen, unfortunately, inflation and gas prices. It's a global situation that's going on because of the pandemic, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we've now seen gas prices go down $1.50 since the height of gas prices. We've seen them go down 15% in the last week alone because of that release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Because we've already made those investments in reshoring American manufacturing, we've seen the highest increase in manufacturing jobs since the mid-90s. Those policies are already working to make our economy more resilient. And certainly, yes, grocery prices have been really awful. I have 4 kids and I do my grocery shopping, and I can tell you it's not pretty right now. That's why we're working so hard to bring down costs here in New Jersey, making energy more affordable, making prescription drugs more affordable for seniors. And that's what I'll continue to do as we drive down costs and get past inflation.
Thank you.
Dave, can I respond to that on the energy issue?
Sure. Just briefly, 30 seconds though.
Right. The strategic reserves are exactly what that's supposed to be. It's supposed to be in a time of emergency. This is a time of possibly economic problems that are caused by the Biden administration, but this is not a national emergency where we need to tap down and save a few pennies on gas. This administration is draining our strategic reserve in a time where Putin and Russia are threatening us. This is not what we should be doing. We should be pumping more oil and natural gas. That's the answer, not biofuel like my opponents wants.
Thank you. Congressman, let me give you 30 more seconds.
Yeah, thank you. I would add that we have increased our output of fossil fuels. We've also increased our investments so that we can develop energy independence from Russia. In fact, that was in the National Defense Authorization Act, which I just passed out of Congress a couple months ago. But the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is actually meant for just this type of situation. When we have people or states like Saudi Arabia and Russia impacting the global markets of energy, we have some resilience here at home so we can continue to stabilize those gas markets here at home. And it's working to do just what it's been intended to do.
I'm glad Mikie Sherrill has come around to energy independence.
Well, let's go. We're going to stick with some of this because inflation and abortion are hugely important issues nationally and in New Jersey's 11th district. So I have a number of questions on those topics. Let's go right into inflation. Mr. DeGroot, I'll start with you. Even after food and fuel costs were stripped out, the consumer price index shows prices increasing by about 6.6% through September. So simply put, everything costs more than it did a year ago. What's the most effective way to lower prices on everything?
Okay. Energy independence. Let's start with the basics. My position has always been energy independence. Heck, I'm into energy dominance. When we control the markets, we control Russia, we control OPEC. But energy independence, when we start pumping natural gas and oil more, and I'm all for green energy, it has a part. I've traveled across America. I've seen the beauty of national parks. But when we have more oil and we have more natural gas, our energy prices come down. Trucking prices come down because fuel prices come down. Fuel prices come down. Trucking prices go down. Food prices go down. Our electricity becomes cheaper. Our heating becomes cheaper. There's going to be a cold winter for some in this district. We're going to have to choose between food and heat. So that's one part. Next thing is let's tax relief and cut spending. We cut taxes and we cut spending. Spending is the biggest problem. Right now, all the bills are passed out of legislation and passed out of Congress are filled with pork and extra spending. These should be one bills. The Inflation Reduction Act should deal with just that and nothing else.
Thank you.
Well, I think we have to do an all of the above strategy to make sure we're driving down costs. So what we've been working on are several issues. First of all, fixing our supply chains, making sure that we're making investments in rail and CDL licenses for drivers and shipping, fixing our port system so we can get goods in and out of our ports more quickly, making sure that we're also addressing costs like bringing down costs for seniors, bringing down energy costs, reshoring American manufacturing. My grandfather worked on the factory floor of General Motors as a UAW member, and we have lost ground in American manufacturing. So reshoring American manufacturing, passing the CHIPS Act, making sure we're producing those semiconductor chips here at home to drive down the cost of new cars. And I can tell you, a lot of these efforts have been bipartisan efforts, the CHIPS Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, so many ways that we're working across the aisle to bring down costs for Americans. And then in some areas like the Inflation Reduction Act, working to bring down costs for seniors, bring down energy costs, and continue to fight to make sure our families have a better, safer, more affordable New Jersey.
And Congresswoman, let me ask a follow-up to this. The officials at the Federal Reserve appear ready to raise interest rates by roughly 0.75% next month. When should the Federal Reserve increase interest rates, and when should they stop?
The Federal Reserve, I would say, acted too late to tackle inflation, which is how we got behind the curve in the first place. So now they're struggling to catch up. And what I think a large part of the concern across the country is that some of the measures of inflation in this country, like home prices, are evidently, I don't see this in our district, but evidently across the country, home prices have already fallen, which is a large part of inflation and the inflationary index. So people are concerned that the Fed is going to overcorrect. Why are we concerned? Because we right now have one of the best job markets we've seen in this country. We've had the fastest recovery from an economic crisis this nation has ever seen. So we want to make sure that we are not harming the economy of the country as we're trying to get past inflation. So quite frankly, the Fed needs to get ahead of inflation. That's critically important. It's an insidious tax on people in this country. But at the same time, acting with too heavy of a hand will send the country into a recession, which we desperately want to avoid.
Okay, Mr. DeGroot, we'll let you respond.
This country is going into a recession, and this administration has been asleep at the switch as far as coming out of COVID. They should have been prepared. They should have been prepared for the jobs and the shipping problems. That's what's wrong with this Congress and total control by the Democrats. They own the presidency, they own the Senate, and they own the House. They are one-party rule. We need to bring some balance and some common sense. This party was asleep at the and these problems could have been foreseen, as also with a lot of foreign policy problems, with energy problems. It's a congressperson's job to not be reacting, but to be proactive, actually. And that's one of the best things a leader can do. And, you know, to the regard to the infrastructure and the CHIPS bill, the infrastructure, yeah, I would have reached across the aisle and I would have worked for it, because that's CD11. CD11, getting jobs, bringing industries back. I'll work with the Democrats on that. And the CHIPS bill, I would work on that as well, because that benefits America. I'm going to be bipartisan. I'm going to work across the aisle.
And Mr. DeGroot, let's stay with questions about the economy for a second. Let's jump ahead to next year and the year after that. And let's say, hypothetically, the rate of inflation drops, but it continues to outpace increases in wages and salaries. Is that acceptable to you?
So is it acceptable to me? In what form are you posing the question?
So what I want to know is, at what point, if wages and salaries don't increase with the rate of inflation, people are always going to be behind. What would be your plan on dealing with that?
Here it is. So that's the thing. Inflation is a tax. Inflation is acting like a tax. It is dragging down on, when you buy products, when you go to the pump, when you're involved in anything. Inflation is acting as a tax. And when you grow GDP at 4%, but you have inflation at 8%, now you're down 4%. So there has to be a balance, and there has to be people that work together and understand how to bring that proper balance. As far as the inflation goes, there are still other things you can do as far as negotiate better trade deals. We can have, as I said, energy flowing more, and that will lower prices. There are a lot of things we can look at, and we can look at some of the bloated bills that were passed by the Biden administration that ended up causing this in the first place. So, as I said, unless we're on the right track by this time next year, we are headed for a major recession.
Speaking of broken policies, I think some of the things that we've seen, for example, in the Trump administration, they held infrastructure week every week and couldn't really get anything done. At a time of an expanding economy, Trump added, I believe, about $400 billion to the deficit, continuing to really do anything but be fiscally responsible. So now we're really addressing some of these root causes. And no, I would not be okay if inflation is rising faster than wages. That is unacceptable. In fact, the wage gap in this country has been a huge concern to me and to a lot of working families across the nation. So making sure that we get past the inflationary curve and that we address wages and keep wages high, which we're seeing now, a growth in wages, are both two really important things.
Thank you. Congresswoman, just a follow-up to that. You made the restoration of the SALT deduction a priority during your 4 years in Congress, even with Democratic majorities in the House and in the Senate and a Democrat occupying the White House. You weren't able to get this done. Why not? And why should voters think that you'll be able to get this done in the future?
You know, I was able to get it done twice through the House. We were able to get a SALT fixed twice through the House of Representatives. And unfortunately, we were not able to get the Republicans marshaled in the Senate to get it passed. In fact, I recently had to fight back against Senator Thune, who wanted to pay for recent legislation with an extension of the state and local tax deduction cap. And so I fought that back. And now I have a plan to get it through at the end of the year. I've talked to the chairman of Ways and Means because I'll always fight to make sure that New Jerseyans are not being double taxed. I think this is an area where my opponent and I really disagree. He's made a statement that he doesn't think that the federal government should pay New Jersey's taxes. I can assure him that anything but that is true. Oftentimes, New Jersey spends more than it gets from the federal government. And in fact, this is not untaxed income. This is income that New Jersey taxes to make sure that we have the nation's best public school system, that we invest in our infrastructure and Head Start programs and our pensions and our police and our teachers, all the things that we love about our state. We want to make sure that we're able to invest in and not sending all that money to the federal government.
Okay, Mr. DeGroot.
Yes, sorry. Listen, Mikie, I have been campaigning for 1 year straight, talking about I am in favor of getting that SALT back. And I would have fought like hell to get that SALT deduction back. I would have stood my ground and said, no, I am not going into any other inflation reduction bill. I want the SALT cap back. And now you tell me that I'm against SALT. I'm against New Jersey high taxes, and I'm against a state that cannot control their spending habits, as this Governor Murphy has, and in the democratically controlled Assembly and Senate of the state. I am for New Jersey. I'm for CD11. I will always fight for this district. SALT is important, and I've always campaigned 100% all year round that I want SALT back. Those commercials that you're putting out, they're lies. So just take them down, because that's not the truth.
Well, they're based on your statements. You've said multiple times that you don't think the SALT deduction should exist, made some comments about New Jersey getting its house in order and the federal government not paying New Jersey's taxes. And, that's why I think voters are concerned, because historically we've seen Republicans, for the first time in the nation's history, cap our state and local tax deductions. And you fundamentally don't believe that the SALT deduction should exist. That's why there's some concern there.
And you called, in the Hills media, you called the SALT deduction a stupid bill. In the Hills media, that was your interview. That was your interview. Please don't interrupt me.
I think SALT is certainly something I believe deeply in.
And the SALT, you have a plan now. When was your plan in 2018, 2020? You owned everything. You had the Senate, you had the House, you have the presidency. Now you have a plan.
Congressman, let me give you 15 more seconds, and then we're going to move on. So,
all right, that sounds great. Obviously, people remember when the Republicans capped this for the first time in history. This was something to go after states like ours, like New Jersey. And I have been able to get it through the House several times, as I mentioned, and will continue to fight hard to make sure that the federal government does not tax New Jersey citizens, unlike, like I said, my opponent, who fundamentally does not believe the state and local tax deductions should exist.
So, Mr. DeGroot, we're going to move on with this. The next question's for you. We're going to move to the issue of abortion. You have campaigned as a pro-choice candidate who agrees with the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision overturning Roe, and thinks that every state should enact its own laws. If you believe that this ought not be a federal matter, does that mean you won't vote in support or opposition to any abortion legislation as a member of Congress?
Well, first of all, David, I'd like to thank you for getting my policy and my position right. Mikie Sherrill has gotten that policy wrong. So I'd like to thank you for stating here clearly that I am pro-choice. I believe in a woman's right to choose. And the Dobbs decision has made it very clear that this is a states' rights issue. I am compassionate and I am concerned about the right of a woman to choose. I do not want to take that woman's right away, and I never did. I never did when I never did when I was 18, never did when I was 20, never did when I was 25. A woman should have that right. I have a 2-year-old daughter now, and I want to be part of her decision-making process. In Mikie Sherrill's view, the process is from the moment of conception to the 9th month. Even with a viable fetus, she believes that it is a choice. New Jersey has its law, and it is up to New Jersey voters to decide. But I believe in a woman's right to choose. As I said, this is New Jersey. This is the law. I believe that the SCOTUS opinion has put that firmly in the states.
Well, Mr. DeGroot says he doesn't want to take that right away from women, and yet the policies he supports, leaving it in the hands of the states, which he has supported, overturning Roe, which he has supported, has now resulted in over 22 million women in this country, and counting, by the way, because there is legislation pending in states in this nation. Over 22 million women now don't have access to abortion with no exceptions. That's the state of play. And so he can say he's pro-choice. He can say the sky is green. That doesn't make it true, because when you are okay with states deciding, you are okay with 22 million women in this country not having access to any sort of abortion, even for the life of the mother, for rape, for incest. And we've seen how that plays out. We've seen in states like Ohio, when sadly a 10-year-old rape victim had no access. Her mother had no access to seek care for her. The answer was supposedly that a 10-year-old should carry a baby to term. That is just not acceptable to me, and not acceptable to pro-choice people across the country.
And Dave, I just have to add that right now, my opponent with her commercials, Mikie Sherrill, I do not believe that a woman should be forced after rape or incest to have the baby, as you describe. I am pro-choice, and that what you described is brutal and violent, and I protected women against domestic violence. We had a case in New Jersey in my courthouse in Passaic County, where there was an incestuous trial that tried a father for impregnating his daughter. That is disgusting. It is immoral. I'm not in favor of it, and stop saying it.
Again, by supporting the overturning of Roe and supporting allowing states to ban abortion with no exceptions, you are now saying that 22 million women in this country, and counting, again, more legislation is pending right now, should not have access to abortion. I don't know how you square this. People in this district want to know where their member of Congress stands and who they're serving. And I think someone like you will say anything you can to just get elected.
Okay. All right. That's pot calling kettle black, but okay. The truth is, I represent CD11. This SCOTUS has ruled. This is a states' rights issue. I would not in favor of any state having a ban on incest or rape. That is insane. So New Jersey has its laws. I respect that this is a New Jersey law, and that's what SCOTUS has ruled. And if we try to codify that, SCOTUS would rule it unconstitutional. So that is my opinion.
Again, saying that a state can allow this is allowing, saying this is a straight states' rights issue is allowing full bans on abortions right now in our country. 22 million Americans now facing that. And I have to say that that's why I believe in Roe. I believe there should be constitutional support for women's freedoms and equality across this nation. I believe this is not a states' rights issue. This is a woman's rights issue. for decisions that should be made between a woman and her doctor, and you do not.
And you
Congressman, I want to ask you a follow-up on
involved in the process, correct? You want to exclude parents from being involved in the process.
we have other questions. Go ahead. Just respond to that, Congresswoman, and then we'll move on.
I think we'd all like to imagine best case scenarios here. We'd all like to imagine that we are talking to our daughters when they're facing difficult situations. I have a teenage daughter. I would desperately want to talk to her about this. I would hope she'd come to me, not because I want to weigh in necessarily, but because I want to support her through a really difficult time. But unfortunately, these aren't always best case scenarios. As you mentioned, there are instances when a father rapes his daughter and she becomes impregnated. Should she have to go seek his permission for an abortion? There are instances when children know if they go to their parents with a pregnancy out of marriage that they're going to get kicked out of their home. There are a multitude of different scenarios. And that's why, again, I think this is in the hands of women to talk to their doctor and discuss these complicated decisions that really should not be legislated on.
Congresswoman, let me ask you a follow-up on that. As someone who supports abortion rights, how far does that commitment extend? Some say that that rights are one thing, but access is a separate issue. Would you support legislation that eliminated financial barriers that block patients on Medicaid from obtaining abortion care?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. DeGroot, let me give you the.
I would like to ask the question if Mikie Sherrill is in favor of aborting a viable 9-month fetus.
I think the time for you to ask. We're coming up on the time for you to ask your question, and you'll have that opportunity. Let me go to a local issue, and I believe it's Congresswoman Sherrill's start on this one. I want to address something that's extraordinarily important to the people of the 11th district, and that's flooding. And I've heard elected officials and candidates. I mean, I'm old, so I've been hearing it for decades and decades about flood tunnels and about flood walls. But the reality is, it's cost prohibitive, and it's just not going to happen. So what, Congresswoman, are the real solutions to mitigate flooding that Congress can provide, and what have you done on that issue?
Well, David, it did happen. For 20 years, we've been looking for a culvert for the Peckman River, and I just got $146 million to do just that, to address the flooding in that area. And that's really huge. After Ida, as you know, we had some fatalities in the district, which was horrible to see. I met with a mother who, just as she's looking at the mud throughout her basement, was telling me that she had been told at 5 o'clock that Hurricane Ida was going to pass them by, go to the west. I've been working on, as the Environment Subcommittee Chair on Science, Space, and Technology with oversight over NOAA, getting better predictions for hurricanes across the country so we know when that flooding's coming and can take precautions. Working with the mayors of Parsippany and Hanover and East Hanover and Florham Park to make sure we're doing the engineering to address flooding in the Whippany River. And then I've already been talking to people in South Orange and Maplewood and Milburn who've come to me because they want to hear what we're doing about flooding in the current 11th district, so we're ready to tackle it in the new 11th district.
Okay. Mr. DeGroot.
Yes, flooding has been an important issue in this district for Passaic County, for Morris County, but the money has really never come through the way it should. Frank Pallone, Congressman Pallone got $26 million for his district, and we are not getting the fair shake for Morris County and for Passaic County. This is clearly an issue that I've talked to mayors from Pequannock. I've talked to Whippany and Hanover, and quite frankly, because I live here, I've seen the rivers overflow. I've seen the devastation that happens even on Route 80s and Route 46 when the major storms hit. This needs to get done. This needs to get done now. It's expensive. There's dredging, there's snagging, there's common sense things we can do now with snagging that would help. Embankments need to be built up. I would definitely work as fast as possible and to make sure that this does not happen and continues to happen across the entire CD11 district. There again, it's coming in is too late to talk about it now. We should have been doing this for the past 4 years. We should have been doing it as soon as 2018, 2020. Now we're 2022 and we're just getting started. No, it's not going to be like that when I become congressman.
Congresswoman, let me give you 30 more seconds.
I would just remind Mr. DeGroot, I just got $146 million for the Peckman, as well as we're already working on and have been convening groups to work on the flooding in the Whippany River and now the Rahway River. I joke that I have the Army Corps of Engineers on speed dial. They've been through many areas of the district. There's an area in Florham Park we're working on a project on, and several others. So I'm proud of the work I've done on flooding, but I'm not finished with that work, and we'll be looking to do more projects in the near future.
And I've talked to those mayors, and they're still waiting for more for aid.
Mr. DeGroot, let me shift to another issue. Crime in your district is up. Crime is up throughout New Jersey. Car thefts are up. The prospects of home invasions are frightening your potential constituents. Is there a federal government solution to decreasing crime, or is this a state and local matter?
Well, part of a job of a congressman will be to lead, to be out there. Not just once for a photo op, but more importantly, to be out there all the time, listening to the police chiefs. I come from law enforcement. I've worked with more agencies than I can count. I've worked with the FBI, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I'm the only person in this race that has actually taken guns and drugs off the street. I know Congresswoman Sherrill said she took guns off the street, and there's an ad with Sheriff Burdnick, but I was in the office during that time, and I don't think there was any guns taken off the street. I did over 100 trials and thousands of cases resolved, but I did the real work. I've done wiretaps. What we're facing now is a suburban crime wave. We don't have an urban area, but a suburban crime wave. And what I hear from the police officers and the police chiefs is they need leadership that affects Trenton. The lack of the pursuit policies that Trenton has are flawed. Bail reform is a nightmare. Catch and release. Juveniles are coming up here with gangs of car thieves. They're driving the cars away. And I know Congresswoman Sherrill will say, I just did a press release and I just was part of a bill this past weekend. Where was she a year ago, 2 years ago? This has been going on. I live in this district.
Right.
I live in Morris County.
Give the Congresswoman a chance to respond to that.
There's burglaries and break-ins, and this is getting bad.
Yeah, I guess, I think what the question on voters' minds is if Mr. DeGroot is willing to misconstrue my record as a prosecutor, as easily verifiable as it is in the cases that I worked on, what else is he willing to lie about just to get elected into Congress? I have worked incredibly hard with law enforcement. It's why I'm the only person in this race that has been endorsed by a police union. I, as he mentioned, have just convened our police chiefs, our prosecutors, and our mayors to make sure we're federally addressing the rash of car thefts. Working closely with them, I was able to put together legislation that they weighed in on to get them the resources to do things like help with overtime, help send people to the car theft task force, make sure we have more LPRs, license plate readers, across the state to address this. I also, about a year ago, was able to, through congressionally directed funds, help Chatham with their response, so that now they're going to see a better response time to dealing with these car thefts because they're getting a fiber optic network. I'll continue to do that work and continue to work hard to make sure that our district is better and safer and more affordable.
Thank you. Dave, can I respond to that?
Just 30 seconds, but then the Congresswoman will get 30 seconds more.
Sure. Congresswoman Sherrill is in favor of something I'm totally against. She's in favor of piercing qualified immunity. A police officer's job is tough enough, and now they have to worry about qualified immunity being pierced. They will be responsible for actions. They will be civilly responsible, civilly liable. She wants to make a police officer's job tougher every day. These police officers are dedicated. They're loyal and they're great people. And right now, there's not a lot of people that want to be police officers anymore. And Congresswoman Sherrill supporting piercing qualified immunity is not going to help put more officers back on the street.
You know, I've been working with our law enforcement for many years now, and I so admire the work that they do. We have had great members of law enforcement attend town halls to help people understand how to keep themselves safe. I've gone to community meetings where law enforcement have been talking about ways community members can better keep our community safe. I know, I remember passing out food at a food distribution site and in my town, and one of the members of law enforcement was telling me how the school board had come to him because as we were doing virtual schooling, one of the young boys hadn't shown up and his sister had been in school, and he said, I know exactly where he is. He's on the playground. I'll go get him. So we have wonderful, wonderful police throughout our district. And that's why I've worked so hard to support them, making sure they have the funding they need. And when there were specific areas where the funding wasn't going far enough, making sure I'm specifically addressing that.
So this is now the part of the debate. It's supposed to come halfway through, but it never really works out that way, where each candidate gets 30 seconds to ask their opponent a question. You'll have 60 seconds to provide an answer, and there'll be a rebuttal. Congresswoman Sherrill will hear your question to Mr. DeGroot.
Great. Mr. DeGroot, in an interview earlier this month on Fox Sports News, you were asked about OPEC's impact on gas prices. In response, you blamed the president, and you said the president has a terrible relationship with OPEC, quote, caused in part by his taking a stand on an issue that was insulting to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You said, quote, that was a really bad thing. It's not a leap to assume you were referring to the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist and longtime resident of the United States of America that drew international outrage. And so my question is, why are you standing with the Saudis on this issue and not with the United States and our notions of freedom of the press and our democratic ideals?
Great question. Here's my answer. I'm not standing with the Saudis. The Saudis are a kingdom. So is Kuwait. And OPEC is a threat to our national security, and OPEC is a threat to our democracy, to our way of life, because we need oil, we need natural gas. And for Joe Biden to go begging, and your president, who you support for a second term, your president, to go begging to Venezuela, who is under a dictatorship, asking Venezuela to pump more oil, and then go begging on his knees to Saudi Arabia, is no message that I think America should be sending. They're going to be begging Saudi Arabia, and Mikey, you just said that their kingdom is killed that journalist, and that's brutal. That's terrible.
Khashoggi.
And yes, Anand Khashoggi, and Putin is raping Ukraine. We should be pumping our own oil and natural gas, and you're against that, and you're against expanding natural gas and expanding oil. And you're for having Joe Biden shut down leases on fields, cut the Keystone pipeline, and that's why he had to go begging to Saudi Arabia and begging to Venezuela.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Let me give you a chance to respond. 30 seconds.
Sure. I think again, with stuff as easily verifiable as my support for extending leases, it makes one wonder what else Mr. DeGroot's lying about. But I would say that. In his interview, he said that the president, and I would say he's not just my president, he's the president of the United States of America, said that he did this. It was caused in part by the president taking a stand on an issue that was insulting to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And again, that was a really bad thing. Do you think you didn't say that?
Him going to Saudi Arabia is laughable because he said what he said. They killed that journalist, and then he goes begging for oil. Did you think that Saudi Arabia was going to give us oil? Did he think Saudi Arabia was going to give us more oil?
I guess I'm asking if you don't think the president should have called out the Kingdom of Saud for their beheading of Jamal Khashoggi.
That is a brutal act by the Kingdom of Saud, and they are no friends of America. Saudi Arabia is no friends of America, and I think we can see that oil and lack of our own independence gets us into these situations. We need to be energy independent to avoid fighting for kingdoms like Kuwait if we don't want to be involved.
So you would like to rescind your comment saying that we shouldn't have taken a stand against Saudi Arabia?
I would like to rescind Joe Biden going and begging on his knees for the same people that he had talked about before. Joe Biden should have just known from the start, and so should you, that Saudi Arabia wasn't going to be doing us any favors anytime soon on energy independence. And Venezuela, go asking for Venezuela.
Again, I would just suggest you're saying anything you think will get you elected. And I think you should really think about our democratic values and freedoms, and supporting freedom of the press would be one of something I think.
Let me give you a group 10 seconds, and then we're going to move on.
I've been fighting for 25 years as a prosecutor, not just a year and a day, fighting for victims and fighting for the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of New Jersey. I've been doing it well, and
thank you.
I'll continue to do so. As a first-time outsider, never been politician, there's one person that's fighting for her life to stay a politician.
Thank you. Mr. DeGroot, let me get your question of Congresswoman Sherrill.
Okay. Yes, Congresswoman Sherrill, the New York Times said you traded in stocks of companies your committee, the Armed Services Committee, reviewed or oversaw. Other news outlets said you broke the law by not publicly disclosing your stock trades. As an attorney and as a federal former prosecutor who knows ethics laws and who has been elected to a federal position, and as someone who supported an investigative committees looking into wrong deeds by members of Congress, do you think you should have been fined, or your activities should have launched a criminal investigation to your illegal activities?
Thanks for that question. I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I did want to talk about it. Over 2 years ago, my husband and I decided to divest of all individually held stocks. In fact, David reported on that, going above and beyond the ethics requirements of members of Congress. We divested of those stocks, and then in the year end did all of our reporting. As I was doing an audit at the end of the year, I found one trade that had not been reported. So I self-reported and paid the fine. And again, going forward, I'm very supportive of making sure we have more transparency and more accountability. A lot of people in our district work on Wall Street. They have really high levels of accountability and reporting requirements. And I certainly think that members of Congress should have the same.
Weren't you caught a second time trading defense stocks while on the armed services? And your Wall Street, since your donors are mainly a lot from Wall Street, please don't defend them. But weren't you caught a second time on the armed services trading on defense stocks? And you were on the front page of the New York Times, bottom left corner?
Again, as I said, over 2 years ago, I've divested of all individually traded stocks. So I've not been doing any individual
But
stocks.
there were 2 times you were caught.
There was no being caught. I fully report all my stock trades.
2 separate incidents.
As I said, it's all public. And several years ago, I divested of all individually traded stocks above and beyond all ethics requirements.
So let's move on, because I don't want to get in the middle of 2 prosecutors. Mr. DeGroot, I want to talk about infrastructure. There's been movement on the Portal Bridge replacement, the Gateway Tunnel project, but what comes next? What infrastructure projects are on your wish list for New Jersey's 11th district, and how are you going to get Congress and the White House to fund these projects?
Okay, so when we're talking about infrastructure, we look toward hey, I lived here all my life. New Jersey is a rough state to live in. I was born and raised here. I know New Jersey problems. I know New Jersey issues, from Route 3 traffic that was started 10 years ago, that jug handles right around Clifton. And everybody in CD11 is probably smiling right now and laughing because they know it. They live it. It's still not done yet. New Jersey needs its infrastructure. Is not a daycare worker at my son's nursery, at my son's school. While I appreciate that daycare worker, infrastructure is about bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, seaports. We are a very congested, very over-traveled state. Our bridges need to be fixed. Our roads need to be fixed. Our ports need to be expanded. Potholes need to be fixed. We are, it's sometimes laughed that we have so many potholes. But again, these are major projects that New Jersey needs. We need to do better from the federal government, bringing back resources And this is where I'm going to reach across the aisle. I am not the typical type of Republican. I'm going to work with the governor. I'm going to work with senators. I'm going to work with unions, and I'm going to make sure that those bridges get built, those tunnels get built, those roads get paved. That's all I want to do for CD11. I just want to be the best congressman.
Thank you very much. And Congresswoman?
Well, as you know, I worked incredibly hard to get shovels in the ground on the Gateway Tunnel project. In fact, in my first term in Congress, I was called the tunnel-obsessed Congresswoman. And it was an obsession of mine because despite having infrastructure every week under the Trump administration, we couldn't get anything done. So now I'm so pleased that we were able to work in a broad bipartisan manner to get the bipartisan infrastructure law passed, to get shovels in the ground on the Gateway Tunnel project. But there's more we need to do. As you know, all our roads in Morris County are over capacity. It's time that we really address some of the long-term infrastructure needs of the district, but also think broader. So for example, I was talking to Governor Christine Todd Whitman a couple months ago about the maglev project from Washington to Baltimore, starting these higher speed rail systems, because I would like to move beyond simply addressing our nation's crumbling infrastructure and our overcapacity roads and start thinking about the future of infrastructure and how we can do better.
Thank you. Congresswoman, and I want to go slowly here. I don't want to flub my math to 2 weeks in a row, but it has been 241 days since Ukraine was invaded by Russia. Today, Ukraine accused the Russian-controlled RT media outlet of inciting genocide as their presenter suggested that Ukrainian children who viewed Russia as occupiers under the Soviet Union should have been, and I'll use exactly his words, should have been thrown straight into a river with a strong current. This war in Ukraine has gone on longer than I think a lot of people thought it would at the start. What's your view of the role of the United States in bringing a quicker resolution to this war?
You know, as you're probably aware, the New York, New Jersey region is has the largest group of Ukrainian Americans in the country, and I've worked closely with them. I've been to the community center in Whippany several times recently for a community event where I'm proud to say a Mark 777 from Picatinny Arsenal was there, which was developed in Picatinny Arsenal and is now changing the tide of the war in Ukraine. I've been to Kyiv several times to first the onset of the war, right before it started, to talk to the president and Defense Minister Reznikov about what they needed to make sure they could protect their freedom and democracy. I was recently there when Zelensky asked that members of the House Armed Services Committee, on which I sit, asked that we come over so he could talk about further successes in the war and what he needed to do to make sure that he was more successful. And in part and parcel of all this, what we've needed to do is gather our allies, our NATO allies, to make sure we're all standing in lockstep to support this and push back against Putin and his agenda. And we've seen some success in recent days. We've seen the incursion in the south and to the east. We've also seen the riots in the streets on Russia, which, remember, protesting the government in Russia can cost you 5 years or more in prison. We've seen men fleeing. In fact, there's reports of Moscow of almost no one left because no Russian wants to fight this war. But the Ukrainians are standing strong to do just that.
Thank you. Mr. DeGroot?
Yes. First of all, I've gone to the Ukrainian Community Center as well as recently as this past Thursday night, I believe. But first, I stand with the Ukrainian people. And I was proud to be at their celebration and take the stage and yell and say to them, Slava Ukraini. And they greeted me with a welcoming, and the people were very warm. We need to give the Ukrainians every opportunity to fight their fight. I'd like to see right now, one of the things the Ukrainians need is air defense systems against drones. I don't want to bring those 6 months from now. I want to bring those next week, in 2 weeks. I want the training. And the better that Ukraine fights, the safer our allies will be. Right now, again, a congressperson's job or a president's job, because Joe Biden and the Obama administration are part of this. when Chechnya got invaded by Putin, when Georgia then got invaded by Putin, we should have saw the writing on the wall that Putin was going to be a dictator and going to be taking as much as he can whenever he can. And there is a sign of weakness in this administration, and that's why he took the steps he did. And now we are playing a little bit of catch up, but we need to give the Ukrainians the HIMARS. We need to give them the javelins. We need to give them air defense systems now. They are facing a swarm of drone attacks and missile attacks, and we need not 6 months from now, but we need to make sure that the Ukrainian people can just keep pushing back and take back the land they lost and make their borders secure again. Once they're secure, then Germany, Poland, and all the other NATO states are also secure.
Thank you. And
I just would say it's interesting that Mr. DeGroot mentioned the javelins, because, of course, I think what really empowered Putin was Trump's close relationship with him. And as you recall, Trump withheld the javelins that Congress had mandated for the Ukrainian people in an attempt to strong-arm President Zelensky into manufacturing evidence against his opponent, Joe Biden. So I do think that beginning to empower Putin was very, very dangerous. I'm glad to see now that, again, the United States has convened our NATO allies and democracies against what's going on in Ukraine right now.
Thank you. And we're coming very close to the end. I want to ask one more question. And Mr. DeGroot, I'll ask you to go first. Those who lead the Congress are hugely important, and it'll be the same variation for both of you. But Mr. DeGroot, if you are in the House, do you support Kevin McCarthy as either the minority leader or the speaker? And if not, who would be on your personal short list?
Okay, great question. So having entered this race, because I saw that the country needs a change and a different type of person, and I'm a different type of Republican. I would wait. I'm not a McCarthy person. I'm not anybody's person. I'm my own person. I won the race being my own person, standing out, fighting for the primary. I'm a fighter, and I am the candidate now, taking on Mikie Sherrill, Congresswoman, and taking on Joe Biden and the failed policies of Joe Biden that is destroying and crippling this country. I am going to be an outsider. I'm going to not be someone connected, not someone who's seeking a higher position. I don't care if I get thrown in the smallest office in the corner of the House, and I get little to no staff or help. I will just do what's right for CD11. So I'm not going to pledge my allegiance to Congressman or to our leader McCarthy or any leader at this point. I'm going to meet the people when I get down there, make my own decisions. And my own decisions will be what is best for CD11. Not like this Congresswoman who said Nancy Pelosi wasn't her choice, and then in 2020 she voted for Nancy Pelosi and has a 100% record voting that same way. Pelosi, Biden, and Mikie Sherrill.
So, Congresswoman, I'm going to ask you the same variation of the question. I know there's going to be a response to what your opponent said, but if Nancy Pelosi means what she says, that she's not going to seek re-election, who do you have in mind if you return to lead the House Democrats?
Again, it's always surprising when my opponent lies about things that are really easily verifiable, like the fact that I've never voted for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. I didn't do it in 2018, and I didn't do it in 2020. I think it's really shocking to hear the Republican agenda that McCarthy has laid out, the agenda that envisions holding the debt ceiling hostage, which Moody's said would cost us 6 million jobs, the agenda to hold it hostage so that they could make cuts to Social Security and Medicare, putting our seniors at risk, and then cutting funding for Ukraine, which we've just talked about how important that is in the fight for democracy worldwide. So I will be supporting somebody for leader or speaker that I think has the best interest of the United States at heart, that's going to fight for our values. I haven't settled on anyone yet. It won't, as usual, be Nancy Pelosi. I haven't supported her, and I don't think she'll be running again. But I am excited about new leadership in our Congress, about bringing new leaders to the fore to make sure that we're fighting for New Jersey.
Thank you. And I mean, the time travels very quickly in these debates. So it's time, believe it or not, for your closing statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds, and we'll start with Mr. DeGroot.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to watch tonight's debate. There's clearly a difference between Congresswoman Sherrill and myself, and it's clear that she's not on the side of New Jersey. She represents the Biden administration and Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time, and those policies are coming home to roost. Those policies are causing inflation, causing high gas prices, causing food prices. Are you really better off financially than you were 2 years ago? Your 401ks are tanking. It is a tough, expensive state to live. And this Biden administration and people that vote with this Biden administration are causing us in CD11 in New Jersey to really can't make ends meet. She's made promises she's failed to keep. There is no civility in Washington, but I will clearly work with anybody to help the district, to help the state. She said that she'd provide salt. She failed. She failed for putting New Jersey families first. She lies about my positions because the record she has been a record of non-production and not getting things done for CD11 like salt. And her policies, Congresswoman's policies, through the leadership of Pelosi and Biden, are causing economic disaster. And this country is headed for a recession, mark my words, unless we get a new leadership in there. I'm the outsider. For 25 years, I was a prosecutor, and I've been a pro-choice advocate for my entire life. I've always believed in a woman's right to choose, and I respect that. And I will do what's best for New Jersey by pursuing safer streets and reducing prices. Thank you. This has to be in a new direction for this district, and I would ask you to vote for me come November 8th.
And Congresswoman, we'll go to you for a closing statement.
Well, thanks. I had some prepared remarks, but given what we've just heard, I think I'll talk a little bit about the debate tonight. What you heard tonight was just a very different vision for this country. I have served this country almost my entire life. I've served in almost every corner of this country and overseas. So I know just how important our democratic values are. I know that this country is best when we lead through optimism and a view to the future that takes in the unity of this country when we work best, that makes sure that we're constantly fighting to make a better and safer and more affordable New Jersey and country, that we put our children first and think about their future as well. My opponent continues to say whatever he thinks will get him elected, even lying about things like I said that are easily verifiable. And really has a deep cynicism about this country and the people in it. I've worked hard to reach across the aisle, not just in Washington, but here in New Jersey, making sure we've passed things like our infrastructure bill to finally get shovels in the ground on the Gateway Tunnel project, to drive down the cost of healthcare for seniors and cap out-of-pocket costs, to make sure that we have the biggest investment we've seen in our environment so our children's future is secure and sound, investing in research and development. So again, we have the most innovative workforce in the nation. That's what we do here in New Jersey. That's how we're successful, and that's how we'll continue to be successful. So I've worked really hard for this state and for this nation my entire life, and certainly in the past 4 years, and I'd be incredibly honored if the voters of New Jersey would send me back.
Thank you. And this brings the New Jersey Globe 11th District congressional debate between Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill and the Democratic incumbent and former Assistant Passaic County Prosecutor Paul DeGroot, the Republican challenger. Brings this debate to a close. I'll quickly make a plug. Next Sunday night, don't miss the 3rd District, Congressman Andy Kim and Bob Healy. They will debate. And I say, just in closing, to those who are watching, to all voters across New Jersey, please take responsibility for your own vote. If you vote by mail, track your ballot, make sure it has arrived. And if you're voting in person, know where your polling place is so that you're not riding around at 8:02 wondering where it is that you need to go. So thank you, Congresswoman Sherrill. Thank you, Mr. DeGroot, for participating in tonight's debate, and best of luck to both of you.
Thanks so much, David.
Thank you, David.